Welcome to Case Files of the Geek Gumshoe. I'm the Geek Gumshoe. This case comes to us from the Dutch East Indies, where sometime in the 1940s, or maybe the 1950s, who knows, a horrifying story of a ghost ship emerged in maritime lore. According to the legend, 2 American ships received a Morse code call for help from a ship identified as the SS Ourang Medan, a Dutch freighter which may or may not have been a smuggling ship. The message stated that the ship was afloat and the captain and the entire crew were dead. The radio man closed out the message with the haunting words, "I die." One of the ships, the Silver Star, approached the distressed vessel and attempted radio contact, and after receiving none, dispatched a boarding party to see what was wrong. When the men arrived on board, they were greeted by a horrific sight. The entire crew was dead, with bodies scattered across the decks. Their faces wore tortured expressions of horror, even though there were no outward signs of trauma. Even the ship's dog was dead. One story even says that all of the bodies were facing in the same direction, their faces upturned to the sky as if some horrible fate was descending upon them. The crew of the Silver Star hooked a towing rope to the bow of the ship and began to tow it. But shortly after they got underway, a fire broke out below deck. The would-be rescuers, who had essentially become salvagers at this point, barely got the rope cut before the ship exploded and sank to the bottom of the ocean. Now, of course, over the years, a number of theories have emerged to explain the bizarre event. Of course, with anything with stories of this nature, you're going to get theories of alien encounters, bolstered by the alleged condition and posturing of the bodies. There's an idea that some kind of a Bermuda Triangle type event occurred, or some kind of interdimensional travel. The strongest theory, however, is that the ship was smuggling something like potassium cyanide or nitroglycerin or some kind of a nerve agent that got loose and killed the entire crew. Although it's much less romantic than the idea of a supernatural cause, this one has the best prospect of being the truth behind this legend. However, there is another possibility in this, and we're going to discuss that in just a minute. You see, there are some issues with the story itself, mainly the fact that according to maritime records, the Ourang Medan was never named in any form in any record of registered vessels. An examination of the logs of the Silver Star, which was in fact a real ship, never revealed any record of this incident. And to understand the gravity of that, one needs to understand the relevance of a ship's log. The log of any ship during the early to mid-19th century was a handwritten ledger used to document every aspect of a journey, so that things like speed, cargo status, crew health, ship's conditions, obstacles along the voyage could be tracked. That log very well could be the only way that a captain could justify to his employers any delays in his mission. Entries in the log are made line by line, and in order to remove an entry, a page would have to be ripped from the log, which would leave a gap in the documentation. Erasing or altering the log would be obvious, and would result in questions about the integrity of the captain and his crew. The simple fact that there is no exact date or location for this incident is cause alone for skepticism. But of course, many people compensate for this issue by claiming a government cover-up. It's the go-to reasoning for anything that needs explanation, but nothing seems to fit. But why would a government cover up the deaths of a bunch of people on a smuggling vessel? What could be gained by this? Once again, we have to examine the question, who benefits from covering this up? There comes a time in some investigations where the story that's presented just doesn't match the evidence, and it requires the investigator to draw one simple conclusion. And that is the case here. The most likely, and unfortunately the least exciting explanation for the incident involving the Ourang Medan is that it just never happened. It's just a sailor's ghost story. The fact that different versions of the story give different locations, different times, and the fact that the ship never appears to have existed in the first place means that chances are the story is completely fabricated. And it's just taken hold in the fabric of urban legend. Online stories about the ship show pictures that are labeled with the ship's name, but are not actually pictures of the ship itself. It's just pictures of an old ship that somebody found on Google and used it to drive attention to their article or video. Some even have creepy pictures of dead bodies. And seeing that, people assume they are from the incident itself. So you see, it's easy for people to fabricate imagery that people assume is legitimate without even having to claim that it is. This kind of acceptance of fiction as fact has a long history with mankind. It includes things like George Washington cutting down the cherry tree, Columbus discovering America, burning witches at the Salem trials, and the idea that women are more attracted to a guy with a sense of humor. Of course, the age of the internet has just made it easier to put things like this in front of a mass audience. If the Ourang Medan ever existed, chances are that the incident was a combination of truth and fiction that was embellished by sailors over the years. More than likely, it came from a minor incident involving a much less interesting event, and over time, it grew into the legendary ghost story we know today. So if you have photos or a video that interests you that you'd like me to evaluate, or if there's a case I need to turn my eye to, leave a message here or send me an email at geek.gumshoe@gmail.com. If you'd like to help this show out, buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. And until the next case brings our paths together again, keep your mind and eyes open, but don't be an easy mark. Geek Gumshoe, over and out.